Alrighty, everybody. Yeah, it's another day, and we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff here on Retired in Korea. RIK, tougher DUI laws, unemployment fraud, China marching on the Han River here in Korea, and then we're going to talk about delivery, and then what was the other thing down there? Delivery woes and a Facebook page. I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy, American expat in Korea, and today, yeah, we're talking about that stuff right there. We're going to be doing that, dipping into the current news of what's going on here in Korea, and just kind of some insights and some things that I see as an American expat in Korea. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a latte. Got a French vanilla blend. It is really, really good. So anyway, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm Steve, and my wife and I, what we ended up doing is retiring early in Korea. We sold the house, the car, the guns, the ammo, everything, including the kitchen junk drawer, which we all have. We threw stuff in a couple of suitcases, and next thing you know, yeah, we're here in Korea and we retired here. So it has been an interesting journey. Been here just over 3 years on this stretch. We've been in Korea for a total of just over 15 years. Terry pops up and says, hi, good morning. Morning. Good to see you. Yeah, we're going to do a little bit of information on what we see here in Korea and kind of the little current news that kind of piqued my interest today. So we're just going to jump right in. So with that, let's start off with DUI. Tougher calls for DUI penalties grow after foreigners killed in back-to-back crashes here in Korea. Yeah, it's not a good thing. Yeah. Fatal drunk driving crashes in Seoul that claim lives of foreign nationals has sparked public outrage and renewed calls for citizens and experts for tougher penalties and stricter law enforcement. On Sunday, a Japanese mother and daughter visiting from Osaka were hit by an alleged drunk driver while using a crosswalk in Dongdaemun Station in Seoul. The 50-year-old mother died, and her daughter in her 30s was severely injured. The driver, whose blood alcohol level far exceeded the threshold for license cancellation, was taken into custody on Wednesday. The crash occurred just a week after a separate drunk driving incident in Seoul's Gangnam district when a 30-year-old Canadian man of Korean descent was struck while crossing the street. The case only became public recently. The driver was arrested. Again, the blood alcohol level was, over the limit for license revocation. The victim went into cardiac arrest and taken to hospital later died. It ends up that the drunk driving laws are not considered lenient, but as with some people might know that here in Korea, and if you don't know, what ends up happening is you have laws and then you have a recommended sentencing. So you have like a minimum and a maximum punishment for whatever crime has been committed. But in Korea, most of the time, yeah, you rarely see the max punishment. So it is really, really rare. And that's kind of going all the way across the board when we're talking about punishments and crime in Korea, unless it is a really, really serious crime. And even then, it's hard to get the max punishment. I don't know what the deal is behind it, but especially when we're talking about DUI laws and things like that, where it results in the death of other people, I think there needs to be some harsh penalties, and there also needs to be some other things put into play to keep that from happening again. And that's what this article is going to go into. Under the current law, causing injury or death while driving under the influence is punishable by a minimum of 3 years in prison and up to life in prison. The guideline of sentence appears stricter than the law in Japan, where the maximum sentence is 30 years. However, here's the kicker. However, in practice, Korean courts rarely impose the toughest penalties. Supreme Court sentencing guidelines show that even in fatal drunk driving cases, prison terms generally peak about 8 years. Yeah, I don't think that's a cool thing to do. I think more time. You do the crime and you end somebody's life or seriously injure somebody, it's time to go to the pokey. Yeah. And it should be for a long time. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, as we continue on, by comparison, Japan has handed down far tougher sentences in similar cases. One widely cited ruling, a drunk driver received 25 years in prison for a crash that killed 4 members of the same family. Considering the public's sense of justice, sentencing needs to be stronger by increasing penalties and applying the law more strictly. Professor at the Korea Road Traffic Authority. So yeah, it needs to be that. I mean, drunk driving is not a cool thing. Let's see. The more persistent problem remains the high rate of repeat offenses, and this is something that has kind of plagued Korea for a while. When it comes to drunk driving, the first time I got to Korea was in 1988, just prior to the Olympics. Yes, I'm old. So with that, there was a lot of people driving, but it was more older people driving, and then there was more cases of drunk driving from what I remember. I don't know, nationally, it could be wrong, so just kind of take that with a grain of salt. But over the years, it was kind of known that if you go out and party and drink and whatever, and you go to one club and you go to drive to another club, Koreans, and that, drunk driving or driving after you've had quite a few drinks was kind of the norm. And matter of fact, that made me very nervous on quite a few occasions. So going out with Koreans and so on and so forth, and riding in their cars, and we go to a club or we go to a restaurant and we drink, and there's a lot of drinks, and then we would go someplace else, a little food and a little, drink place and whatever, and then they drive somewhere else. That really, really bothered me. It would just be like, oh, I just want to go home. Korea has made a lot of advancements in regards to the laws for drunk driving, and the social perception of that has improved as, hey, don't drive drunk. Matter of fact, they even have services where if you drive, let's say you go to a restaurant and you eat and then you drink a lot, somak and soju and beer and whatever it is, makgeolli, you're just downing it like a fish to water. There's actually apps that you can get on that you can contact somebody and say, hey, I need somebody to drive me and my car home. And what ends up happening is somebody will come and they will drive you and your car to wherever you want to go. Sometimes they'll drive you to another restaurant, you drink some more, they drive. It's almost like a taxi service type of thing. But it really cuts down the amount of drunk driving, which is really, really good. Ferrithus pops up. Hey, Steve, early morning stream for you, right? Yes. And that means it's going to be evening for you. So good evening, sir. We're just kind of talking about drunk driving, and the recidivism rate in Korea is the next thing we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and dip into that, because this is the kicker here. The recidivism rate for drug crimes is 38%, but for drunk driving, it's 44%. Holy crow. So that means if you get, somebody gets busted for DUI, there's a 44% chance that person is going to be a repeat offender. Yeah, that's not good. While the overall number of drunk driving cases has declined, the rate of repeat offenses has not changed over the past decade. He stressed stronger sentencing alone is not enough, and more practical measures are needed to prevent repeat offenses. And this is where Korea is going to get and start doing things like America has. One such measure is to introduce the ignition interlock device, which will be mandated starting October 26 next year. These devices detect whether the driver has consumed alcohol and prevent the vehicle from starting if detected. We've seen that in the United States. 28 states have adopted that system, resulting in an estimated 80% reduction in repeat offenses, which is kind of a thing. They're moving in the right direction, but accidents still happen. When they do occur, it's time for courts to demonstrate stricter application of the law. So, yeah, there it is. Tougher calls for DUIs. And that is definitely something I am behind because anytime that you get into an accident, that you cause severe injury or death of other human beings, yeah, there should be a severe penalty. And it's unfortunate with Korea that, it can go from 3 years to life in prison, but they kind of peak out around 8 years. If you kill somebody because you're a drunk driver, I'm just saying it probably should be longer prison term sentence thing going on. So, yeah, that's something that I personally think that should be a thing. I don't know. What do you all think? Do you think is it too lenient? Is it too strict? Or do they need to be more strict when it comes to DUI laws here in Korea? Put it in the comments section. I'd like to know because personally, being in the U.S. military and being stationed in Korea and seeing accidents and things like that where obviously people were drunk. And, this even brings into question, well, what about GIs? Have GIs ever had drunk driving here in Korea, military service members? And they have, So that brings in a whole nother ball of wax. How tough are we going to be on our American servicemen and women that are stationed here in Korea under the Status of Forces Agreement? And what are those punishments? That's something I tried to look up, and I couldn't really find a lot of information, so I didn't want to bring that into the picture. But I do believe that harsh punishments is needed when we're talking about DUIs, and especially if it's repeat offenders. Holy crow. Which is weird, because Korea, you can get a taxi to go absolutely anywhere that you want, and it's a huge taxi culture. But then again, people like driving. They like their cars, and Korea's caught up to the United States, and where there's a ton of cars here in Korea. So I get it that people don't want to rely on a taxi, but if you're driving and you get DUIs, yeah, you should probably, I don't know, maybe the first time, if you don't hurt anybody, then there should be some punishment. But if it results, even if your first time, or if it's a repeat offense where you hurt or kill somebody, yeah, you need to jack up that prison sentence. That's all I'm saying. Let's see. Terry pops up and says there was a lady here in the country I live here in Texas. She was busted for her 8th DUI charge. They finally gave her 20 years. Yeah, there's crazy stories about that in the United States where they collect them like, I don't know, Pokemon cards or, whatever. It's just like, it's insane how many times they will let people, just kind of roam the streets and drive. Of course, there's a number of people that continue to drive even though their license was revoked. But, yeah, it's there. I think there needs to be some other measure in which, but then, what about the new cars that we have, and all the electronics and things like that? Or what if you have an ID card with, a real ID or a microchip in it that identifies the person, and as soon as that person gets into a vehicle behind the steering wheel, the car just doesn't drive? Is that an option? Or can that be misused by, the government or evil powers and things like that? Is there going to be some overreach in something like that? That's kind of an interesting little thing. Pat Starr pops up and says, is Korea tough on drug crimes? Yes, they are. Matter of fact, Korea, I don't think they're getting as tough as they need to be, but they're getting tougher with the rise of drugs coming into Korea. It's becoming more and more of a problem, especially with foreign nationals that come to Korea either legally or illegally and set up distribution networks and criminal gangs and all of that stuff. That is really coming up, and more Koreans are getting into drugs, unfortunately. A lot of young people are getting into drugs, and with that, there needs to be harsh penalties, I think. But in previous, I think I mentioned it in a previous video where I talked about it a long time ago, where Korea was coming up with more or another department and expanding their investigation of drug enforcement and things like that, which also included tougher penalties for drug crimes as well. So, but specifically, I don't know exactly what like the minimum or maximum prison term or sentencing is for those things. Terry Law pops up and says, there have been 4 fatal wrong-way crashes in Houston in the last couple of years. Ooh, man, that is crazy. I was from Colorado, and working in law enforcement, we have seen people that would go the opposite way on highways, on one-way streets, people that were drunk, of course, criminals, they don't really care. People that are running from law enforcement and things like that, or just joyriding around, driving in the opposite direction that cause fatalities or serious injuries. And that is something that, I don't know, that's not a good thing. It definitely is not a good thing. Crazy stuff. But that's, a lot of people will end up drinking because of the bad economy. A lot of people will end up trying to, go to a bottle to numb themselves from the problems that they're facing here in Korea and other countries abroad, the United States, overseas, Europe, pretty much every place. If you have a bad economy, you're going to have drug and alcohol related incidents. And part of the problems that we end up seeing in Korea that drives people to drink is the unemployment that we see. So we're going to get into that. Did you like that transition? That was a little bit better. Korea wrestles with rising unemployment payouts and fraud. So too generous to be sustainable. Remember I talked about this? I talked about in other videos where countries were going to crack down on fraud and paying out welfare and benefits and so on and so forth. We talked about a recent video about foreigners being in Korea and Korea giving welfare to people, which I didn't really understand, because if you're in Korea and you're a foreign national, you shouldn't be getting welfare. You should be deported back to your home country. But in the previous video brought out that Korea says, well, if Koreans are in your country, then we're going to have this reciprocity agreement that we will give your citizens welfare. That is a bad decision, in my opinion, because if you can't support yourself in a country, doesn't matter your nationality, you shouldn't be in that country to begin with. You should be deported back, because what we're seeing is that, yes, it is not going to be sustainable. So yeah, that's part of the thing we see. Too generous to be sustainable. Kind of goes along the same line. Excuse me. Many countries are facing challenges of robust labor force, multiple layoffs, and unemployment. Korea is no exception. Since '95, it operated an unemployment benefit system that provides up to 60% of a worker's average wages from their final 3 months of employment. Kind of a good thing, kind of a transition. It gives you money to survive until you can get your next job. The system offers temporary financial support and facilitates the transition back into the workforce. For 33-year-old Che, the benefits came at a critical time. After his employer delayed paying wages for months, he quit and began looking for other opportunities, which is a thing that happens here in Korea. There's a lot of reports of where employers don't pay people, don't pay them on time, or just don't pay them, period, and then has to end up going to court, which is really, really rough. During that period, unemployment benefits proved to be essential, providing roughly 2 million won, about 1378 won per month. Now it's about 1425 for 6 months. Wow, that's pretty good. The benefits allowed me to take my time and prepare carefully for my next move. But the cost of that safety net is swelling. Payouts are reaching record levels as Korea contends with a sluggish job market exacerbated by the prolonged economic downturn and the aging population. Unemployment benefits dispersed in September totaled 1.1 trillion, up 10.9% from the year earlier, according to the Ministry of Employment and Labor. This is the eighth straight month that monthly payments have topped 1 trillion won, the longest run on record. The previous peak was 7-month strength during COVID in 2021. And the reason that we get this is because of the pool of quality jobs and labor market is, it's a rough time here in Korea. A lot of it has to do with the war in Ukraine, and you might think, why would that be a thing? Because Ukraine has a lot of natural resources that goes out into the world, and unfortunately, the interruption of those resources going out has caused problems in the world economy. And then you throw other things and other variables into the mix, and Korea is finding it's having a hard time because it has inflation just like every other country. It's not as strong, and the exchange rate is one thing that shows it's not doing well, which I think I think it was like yesterday or the day before, it was like 14.45 won per dollar. To kind of put that into perspective, back in 97, when the IMF bailed out Korea, the won exchange rate was 1,500 won to the dollar. Not saying that's the only reason why the IMF stepped in, but it's just one of the things. And so there's a lot of unemployment going on. A lot of companies are pulling back their workforce. They're not hiring as many people. You do more with less. They're tightening the belts, and they're consolidating. They're trimming the fat from the business, which means some people are losing jobs. So anyway, it ends up that Korea is having problems, kind of like the United States, with generational welfare people. People in the U.S. who have been on welfare their entire lives. There's people where their grandparents, their parents, them and their children have been on welfare as far as they can remember. They really abuse the system. I recently saw an article in the United States where it was talking about this lady who was complaining about her welfare was being interrupted, and she had been on welfare for 30 years. 30 years. Holy crow. How I just don't get that. So the point is, there's a lot of people that abuse the system in the United States. We all see it. We all know it. But unfortunately, it's happening here in Korea. Generous unemployment benefits provides some financial stability for job seekers, but also carries the risk of encouraging moral hazard. In other words, people that are going to be scamming the system. The think tank noted that this year's minimum monthly unemployment benefit of 1.8 million won outpaces the take-home pay of the full-time minimum wage worker earning 1.84 million won. You're getting paid more for not working than working. That is inherently stupid. That is wrong as the day is long, and there is no incentive. Matter of fact, it actually does the opposite. It doesn't incentivize people to go out and look for jobs because it's like, I'm unemployment and I'm making more money here than if I went and got a normal job. We see it in the United States. We see it in other countries, and unfortunately, it's popped up here in Korea. This income reversal, where the unemployed receives more than a full-time minimum wage earner, is both unusual and alarming. Korea is the only country where this kind of distortion exists. The OECD, which OECD is, what the heck does that mean? It means Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Okay. OECD. There's also no limit on repeat claims as long as the applicant has at least 180 days of employment insurance coverage within the previous 18 months. Repeat recipients, let's take a look at this here. Repeat recipients who claim benefits 3 or more times in 5 years rose from 100,491 in 2021 to 112,823 in 2024. The imbalance is fueling public criticism and fraud because anytime you give your unemployment benefits that makes more on unemployment than you do than working a regular job, you're going to have some fraud. We've seen this in the United States and other countries, and it's happening here. In September, recipients from Taejon were caught vacationing abroad while falsely claiming benefits by reporting active job searches in Korea. Oops. Yeah. As they're on a beach in Thailand or something, and then I'm actively seeking jobs, and they weren't. Online platforms like YouTube openly share tips on how to quit quickly and still qualify. Fraudulent claims totaled 23 billion won across 17,000 cases, which with only 66.3% of funds recovered. Total value of such claim has trended upward from 28 billion in 2021 to 32 billion this year. Yeah, it is definitely needs some reforms in all this stuff. So, and with any welfare system, you're always going to have people that are going to scam the system, and that is a problem. There needs to be some type of oversight with that. Ferthus says the fact that some people get more unemployed than employed isn't a problem of too high benefits, a problem of stagnating wages for decades. And that's the other side of the coin. There's something to be said for that. Now, you also need to take into account the cost of living in Korea and, the minimum wage. And again, on the outliers, the average Korean, how much do they pay for housing and utilities? Well, that can be skewed because if you go to places like Seoul and Gangnam, Busan, some of the most expensive places in Korea will skew those numbers a little bit. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. But from what I've seen in the Korean news, they just haven't adjusted the system to deal with that. And a lot of that has to do with the exchange rate. But again, it's something that needs to be adjusted. And with that being said, there is something to be said for the minimum wage rate, which just has been recently increased just a little while ago. So that comes into play. But with a bad economy, it's kind of hard to do that. And so if you raise the minimum wage, which they did in a bad economy, again, there's not going to be a lot of people that are going to be hiring. And yeah, it's just kind of it's an ugly situation to be in. So hopefully Korea is taking steps to get past this, and with the new president and everything, and hopefully with the trade deals and things that they've got going on, it seems like Korea is really pushing forward to get the economy going, which I think it's heading in the right direction. Ferthus says everyone can go on unemployment and abuse the system, but most people would not want to do that because the amount you get is barely enough to live on. That's true. For me, in my experience, unemployment was shameful. And I remember being in the United States Army, employed in the Army full time, and my pay was so low that I qualified for food stamps. And I put that shit off as long as possible because that was so shameful to me, was to be on public assistance. I worked part-time jobs, I did side gigs and stuff like that, but finally it got to the place of where, my boss and the people over me, that they're like, dude, just go get it. You'll get food assistance and stuff like that, and it'll definitely help. And yeah, it sucks, but it's a benefit. You can get it. Go use it. And I felt so bad. And so, but with older generations, you have people that would be like that they would do everything that they could, taking second jobs, finding another job, or, whatever it was, doing something so that they wouldn't have to go on public assistance. Whereas nowadays, from what I see in the United States, in my experience, and working in corrections and things like that, and in law enforcement, unfortunately, there's so many people that are just like, it's all a scam. You have people that are scamming the Social Security disability system. You have people scamming the unemployment payments that they get, the welfare system, and hiding their assets and the money that they're making. And it's just insane on what they will end up doing just so they can continue to live off of the tit of the American government, whether it's state or federal. And it's just unfortunate that we get a lot of that abuse. But then again, there's not a lot of things that have changed in time to prevent such abuses, because that aspect of the welfare system hasn't been updated to have accountability or be able to guard against things like that. So that comes into play as well. And being in investment real estate, when I was in the United States, we had a number of rental properties, and there were people that rented from us. They paid no rent because they got it off of the public assistance. Their housing was paid for. They didn't have to pay for food. They had multiple people living in a house that, in other words, they pooled all their money, and it was just insane. They had the nicest cars. They had motorcycles. They had the nicest clothes. They had designer handbags. They had all of this stuff, and they were it was scamming the system on a city level, a state level, a federal level, for unemployment, for disability, and so on and so forth. And it was insane. This one tenant that we had, he had a notebook that showed like a flow chart on all the stuff that you could get. And it's like, well, if you've been unemployed for this long, you can get this assistance. It was like a who's who and a how-to of how to scam the system and never have to work again. And this guy hadn't worked in 15 years. But he could. He'd go to the gym, it was totally insane on how there's no systems to combat against such fraud and abuse. And unfortunately, I think we do need a welfare and public assistance system. But we also, on the other hand, we also need to have accountability, and we have to have things in place so that system isn't abused. Just absolutely crazy. Skua says, perhaps with AI, a full automation, they pay people for no work and tax you to death to do it. AI, and I don't know, there's something to be said. Can AI provide ways in which to detect fraud, waste, and abuse, and to minimize, the people that try to defraud the welfare system, which is obviously needed for people, but then you have people that their full-time job is to scam the system? There's got to be a way to do that. But then again, on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, what? How is the AI? Who made the AI? And can somebody who made the AI, can they scam? Well, of course, somebody always can scam the system. Faritha says, I hear we need more oversight to curb abuse everywhere, but looking to the actual numbers, employing more inspectors would not even pay for itself by reducing the abuse. And that's true, because you have so many people that are abusing these systems, these welfare systems that are obviously needed, and people do need these things from time to time. So there needs to be other ways in which you can detect this fraud, waste, and abuse. But unfortunately, the systems that we have are not interconnected to be able to talk to each other and to detect this abuse. And that's why, you'll have people, we have people, unfortunately, that would get Social Security numbers. They would get Social Security numbers through nefarious ways, and then they would use those Social Security numbers, not for Social Security disability or anything like that, but they would use those Social Security numbers. The guy that I told you with the book and the flow chart and how to scam the system, yeah. I mean, it was just like, oh my gosh, seriously. Why would anybody want to work ever again? But you get the Social Security number. If you get the Social Security number, he says, here's a list of all the things that you can get from the state, federal, and county governments for assistance. And a lot of things just nobody even knows about. And it's insane because a lot of the assistance that we get is doubled up or tripled up. And this agency doesn't talk to this agency. There's no oversight. It's like, well, wait a second. They're getting this for this. And then over here at this other agency, they're getting the money for the exact same thing. So why are we paying them double or even triple through the different agencies? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, granted, all of those agencies came up and said, well, we need to fill need to help those that are less fortunate, which I totally agree with. But when you have multiple agencies that are giving out money for the exact same things, maybe there needs to be some little accountability and some oversight and say, hey, well, instead of paying Joe Johnny Boxer Rocks, generational welfare person and his family to get money for food from this and this and this and this agency on federal, state, county, whatever, government agencies, and instead of getting paid 3 and 4 times that amount when they only need one, that would curb a lot of the fraud, waste, and abuse. So, yeah, it's just really a weird thing. But here in Korea, they're starting to see this. They're tightening their belts, like other countries have started to do, where it's Japan, for example, has taken the route of saying, hey, if you're a foreigner in our country, you're going to have to be able to support yourself. Here in Korea, a lot of that happens. The visa that my wife and I are on, we had to prove that we could support ourselves. But unfortunately, there's this new wording that has come out here in Korea, globalization, and that there's a certain political party that is concerned about the globalization of the country of Korea, that we need to be more globalized. And so that's why we need to pay welfare for foreigners that are in Korea that can't support themselves, which makes no sense. If you can't support yourself in a foreign country, you need to go back to your own country. I'm not saying I don't like these people, but it's an unnecessary drain on the welfare system that's meant for the citizens of Korea. And instead of making it a lifelong thing, which they're finding out, they're tightening all of these belts and saying, hey, we need to get on top of this. One, because we're in a bad economy. So it's really rough. Farithus says, that's why tax audits are usually only done on high-income earners, because the 500 Bob didn't report any worth, what was that? Hold on a second. Because the 500 Bob didn't report any worth any auditor's time. I'm not sure how that goes. It's horrible that they didn't pay you as a living wage. That should have not have been happening. Oh, the time I was in the military. Yeah, it is what it is. But going back to that, the good thing is that, yeah, I wasn't getting enough of a living wage, but that pushed me to excel at my job in the military and pushed me to get promoted early. So I did everything that I could. It was kind of like a kick in the butt, a slap in the ass to be, hey, you need to get your stuff in gear. You need to get promoted so that you can provide for your family. Now, obviously, it was just making the best of a bad situation. I don't recommend that. But the military has changed where they now have a living wage, which is good. You got on-post housing and so on and so forth. Excuse me. So there's that. But that was the mindset of me, and that was the mindset of a lot of other people was, hey, I'm not getting paid enough, so I'm going to work my butt off to get promoted. And that's how I got early promotions at every promotion level. Do I think, it shouldn't have been that way in the first place? I should have just wanted to get promoted because that was a thing that I wanted to do. But it was extra incentive for me to do that. Let's see. Where are we at now? I know a bunch of people on unemployment benefits, and I would not want to swap places with them. Yeah, there's a wide range of people that were on public assistance that we knew when we were doing real estate investing and renting. the tenants that we had over 60 properties and so on and so forth. And yeah, there's some people, it was just like, holy crow. People were having rough lives. And people that actually deserved it, barely making it, but again, they were making it. They had subsidies for housing, they had subsidies for utilities, they had food and all that stuff. They had heat, they had water, they had all of those things, so that they could live and survive, and that would allow them the breathing room. But still, it's not what I would want to do. But then again, I would be working my butt off to try to get a better job. So, but yeah, unemployment benefits was not meant to be a full-time job. That's the whole thing. And especially here in Korea, and it says, that it's like 3 months or 6 months, just enough time to get you over the hump of unemployment so that you can go apply for jobs, get another job, and then move on with your life. But the problem with the fraud, waste, and abuse is that you have people that will, it doesn't make sense. There's places where I lived where you could get on welfare and never get off. And you never had to say, oh, I'm looking for a job. There's no requirement for looking for jobs. Or if there was a requirement, it was like, yeah, I look for jobs here, here, and here. And they turn in a paper and that's it. Nobody checks anything because it's government workers. Nobody, So the whole system needs to be revamped from top to bottom, when it comes to accountability, when it comes to detecting fraud, waste, and abuse. And there really needs to be, because if you actually go check and see how people are living, if you're pulling up in an Escalade, with 28-inch rims and custom stereo systems that are blaring that cost like, $5,000 to $10,000, and you're on welfare and assistance, and I don't know, something's not right. But generally, and in my younger days, being on public assistance, it was shameful. But again, and whether it's right or wrong or not, it really pushed people to get jobs and to push jobs and to say, hey, this is uncomfortable. It's not good. I don't want to be on this. I want to get employed as fast as possible. And so I think there's a big difference between that generation versus the generational welfare people that we have today that are like, case in point, we had a family member, and person got married to somebody in a generational welfare family. Grandparents, parents, him, the kids below, none of them have ever worked. And he was getting Social Security disability, and it's like, this was many, many years ago. And I think he was like 20 or 21 years old. I was in the military, and I had already been married, had our kid and everything, and I was going through hard times. I was working side jobs. So anyway, and it's like, well, he had married somebody in our family, an extended family member. And so it was like, okay, and well, so what do you do? And he says, oh, well, I just, do this and that, and, watch TV, and then, we'll come over here and swim, my grandparents' place. And then it's like, well, it's kind of like, well, no, I meant like job. And he said, oh, I don't work. And it's like, you don't work? What do you mean? You got inheritance, or what's the deal? And that's when he told me with zero shame whatsoever that, yeah, I got Social Security disability because I can't read. And then he told me a bunch of the other stuff. And it's like, I couldn't believe it. Grandparents, parents, him, and kids below him, nobody had ever worked in their entire lives. And it's like, oh, you can't read, so you have a disability. Yeah, I just can't work at all. I can't work because I can't read. And it's like, I saw you reading the newspaper early this morning. And he's like, oh, I was just, and he knew he was caught. I was just looking at the pictures. Generational fraud. That just pisses me off. Terry says, if you can't support yourself in the Philippines, you are on the street. They have no welfare system there. Wow. That's a little rough. Work or don't. Wow. And that was, the Philippines is a place that I was considering as a backup plan for retirement in case something happens here in Korea. I was thinking about getting the SRRV courtesy visa as retired military, but not that it has to do with welfare or unemployment, and they have no welfare system there. But that's why their family units are really close together, and that the kids get married. They'll often have the parents or the grandparents live with them to take care of them. That is their welfare system. Don't have a federal one. So, but with that, Korea was kind of like that for a while, because of the Korean War. I mean, that wasn't that long ago, and that the welfare system was non-existent. And so you did have where a man goes out, he meets a wife, they get married, and then they would take care of the son's parents as they got older. That was the wife's duty, the first son, that was kind of the whole deal there. And that went on and still continues on to this day here in Korea, to where the younger generations will take care of the seniors, the mom and the dad, or, the dad passed away and mom, and so, they'll come and live with the children. Because the welfare system for seniors is kind of lacking here in Korea as well. It's not as bad as the Philippines, but I saw a report that was talking about like 1 in 3 seniors are like poor, like poverty, because they didn't have a social security system, kind of like back when the United States did. A lot of them, just made enough to make ends meet, and so they didn't have a retirement system. Korea does have a retirement system, but what it's paying out is kind of limited, and that's why you'll see a lot of seniors that will go and collect recyclables and cardboard and things like that, and you'll see them with their carts and all that. These old grandmas that are getting cardboard from stores, and they'll go into recycling centers to get paid for that, and that's what they end up doing. There's a huge, you see it a lot. It's pretty wild. And while Korea is making steps to get better at providing, the welfare for those seniors, it's still kind of behind the power curve. But they're making forward momentum on that. So, but with Philippines, it's the same way. You're expected as the child to take care of your senior parents. Faritha says, as we back up, it says, I think blaming exploding benefit costs on abuse and waste is wrong. The vast majority of people on these programs get them legally because they need them. Low wages, hold on a second. Last part says, low wages are really a problem. Yeah, and that's part of it as well. But when you look at, I'm not blaming exploding benefits totally on abuse, because it's absolutely true. Yeah, it's about the low wages that need to be raised, and the minimum wage and things like that, and the rise in housing and expenses. And fortunately here in Korea, it's not as bad as what it is in the United States. The United States is going to hit a time where economically it's going to stub its toe and it's going to go downhill. And with the high price of housing and utilities and all that, it's going to be hard. It's going to hit the United States, and it's going to be massively hard. But for the abuse, it is a very big concern. And especially when you start looking at the Government Accounting Office, and when you look at the fraud, waste, and abuse, it has systematically and increasingly gone up, and where it is a big problem. It's not the main problem for the exploding costs of benefits, but it is a variable that is going up over time. And that's a lot of other countries here in Asia and things like that. They're seeing a lot of fraud. And during bad economies, they're tightening up and trying to mitigate that fraud, waste, and abuse, so it's not so much of a drain on tax-paying citizens, and they can get to actually, giving the money to people that actually deserve it. Ferrith says, the kick in the butt for you really just sounds like you had to go above and beyond your job description just to make a living wage to be. Yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely was. I wish I didn't have to do that. But at that time, the mentality for me and other people and coworkers and the people around me, we have a different mentality than a lot of the mentality that we see today, especially if people try to scam the system. Because back then, you couldn't really scam the system. It was, you had to report. You had to show, that you were actively trying to get a job and put in applications. And I remember there was people that you had to go get an interview, and then you had to get the person that you got the interview with, you had to get their information. Then when you took that back, that information was checked. And so somebody would call, hey, did Steve Wilson, come and get an interview for you, with you, and blah, 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 and, what was the deal, and why wasn't he hired, blah, blah, blah. There was some interaction between the services and the employer to maintain and say, okay, well, is he scamming the system? No, he didn't want the job. He's just checking the block or whatever. There was that type of accountability. But these days, there's places where you don't even, people were up in arms because they were like, especially in Colorado, that, you have to do so many interviews in X amount of time. How dare they do that? And the people were pissed off because they had a free lunch and nobody was checking up and nobody was trying to get a job and nobody was doing interviews and nobody, they're just throwing money out left and right and people were scamming the system. So, there's that. George pops in, says howdy. Terry says a lot of the kids in Korea will give their parents a monthly allowance. That is true. And like I said, you'll have a lot of Koreans that will, the eldest son and his wife and their family will take care of, the parents of the son and so on and so forth. Ferrith says, I just don't think the scamming is ever even close to 1% of the programs. I'd have to do some searching on that, but when you start looking at, let me see if I can I've got where is that? I'm trying to, let me see if I can find it on my computer. I don't know if it's on this. I have a couple other drives, but I don't have them plugged in. They might be on the other ones. Well, no, that's not there. Let me try. Nope, it's not that drive. I only got one other drive. Let me see if I can find it on this one. Yes, I know, password. And it's not on that one either. Okay. It's got to be on another drive. Anyway, let's see if I can find it on, I might have it in a Word document. Hold on a second. Terry says, in the Philippines, it's the older daughter that has the duty of the oldest son in Korea. Oh, really? So the daughter's responsible for taking care of the parents instead of the eldest son. Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty wild. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. I found it. It was in a Word document that I cut and pasted and found information. As far as percentages of fraud is defined as deliberate deception for illicit gain, and often 1% or less are based on available estimates. Public perceptions of high fraud are there. In Medicaid, 79.1% of improper payments in 2024 were due to insufficient documentation. The GAO estimates annual fraud losses at $233 to $521 billion in the recent years, which is 3 to 7% of the federal obligations. So, when you're talking about $233 billion to $521 billion in just 2024, holy crow! It's a small percentage, 7%, but that number has been growing over time, and it's still growing. So, and what was let me see if I can find the other one. Overpayments for food stamps was 4%, Medicaid 2% of convictions. Most cases 36% of convictions for personal care services. Overall fraud was 1%. In his Social Security Administration recovered $52.6 million in fraud related to funds. Wow. Yeah. So with that being said, even though the percentages are low, like 3%, and that one, which was 7%, that's a considerable one. But even if you get 1%, or if you get 2, 3%, you're talking millions and billions of dollars. And collectively, all those things add up. 7%, $520 billion due to fraud. I would say that's a significant chunk of change. Let's see. John Hutchinson pops in, says howdy. Farithis pops up and says, Trump's USDA secretary said SNAP is such a corrupt program. She said that they did a review over 6 months and made dozens of arrests. So less than 1,000 on a program with 40 million people is less than 0.0025%. I don't know about that, but I'm going to take your word for it. But on the other research that I've done on that, on programs, when you're talking, it's a small percentage. It's only 1%. It's only 3%. It's only 7%. And when those numbers get up into the millions and billions of dollars, $500 billion, that's not nothing to sneeze at. I don't know. I just, again, I take everything down to like my personal finance and my personal budgeting, stuff like that. And that if, say for example, my daughter, it ends up that my daughter is going through a hard time, and then she has to come and live with us until she can get another job. Okay, so there's that. But if she comes around and then she has 3 or 4 other people coming in and she's saying, hey, I need more money for food or whatever, and she's giving that money to other people or whatever, there needs to be some accountability and say, hey, wait a second, you're eating for like 5 or 6 people, but you're not getting big. You're not getting fat. What's going on? There's going to be some things to where it's like the budget can only sustain so much. So that's it's again. Farithis says 500 billion sounds big, but 3 to 5% is just nothing. Even if you recovered all of it, the cost of the program would not even change, and the cost of all those audits would eat that right up. And that's true. It could be. But now that we have things like AI and stuff like that, you could definitely update systems that would minimize the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse. So that way, but 500 billion is big. I'm just going to have to say it is big. And if you have a way to stop that fraud, waste, and abuse and take that 500 billion, how many people could you feed with 500 billion? People that actually needed that 500 billion for welfare and public assistance and so on and so forth. For seniors, were woefully deficient on Social Security and the payments, which was based off of, we already talked about that before in the past. But I wouldn't I think when you start saying, it's just a small percentage, then it's not really, then over time, more and more people abuse it. Those percentages go up and up and up. I don't know. It just, I get your point in that, yeah, to be able to do those things and do those audits takes manpower, it takes labor, it takes, hiring somebody and paying them, and that it's a wash. But with systems that we have today, and if we can interconnect those systems, then once those systems are in place, then we can not have to have that massive outlay of labor and employment of people. It can all be done electronically to where we have that accountability and minimize the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse. So I get your point, totally valid. If you have to hire 10 people, you got to pay them and their retirements and all that stuff. Yeah, it probably outweighs, but we have computers these days, and if we can interconnect these systems together, that's where we get to a place of where we can really look and say, hey, that we need to minimize. Like when you run a business, I ran businesses on the side. I did real estate investing. I did, carpentry. I did rehabbing houses and rehabs, bathrooms, kitchens, the whole 9 yards. I did basically everything. So doing all that, when you start going through and saying, hey, and some of our suppliers for the goods that we bought when we rehabbed houses, we go through the numbers and it's like, well, you're going through the books and you're like, wait a second, there's a charge here. A one-time charge. It was like, okay, well, that's not a big deal. It's insignificant. A few $100s here and there. But then it happened again. And then it happened again. And then it happened again. And it's like, well, wait a second now. So we started looking into it and seeing that it was an unjustified charge. So I had to go back to our supplier and say, hey, this is, yeah. And sure, it was only $100 or $60 or $75. But if you do that over a period of time and over the course of a year, that adds up to thousands of dollars, where in a job or a small business, every dollar counts. And so for me anyway, I can only speak on my behalf, and the mentality that I would have and the people that I worked with is you need to track the nickels, the dimes, and the pennies, because those things add up over time. And in the job that we were doing, we weren't living high on the hog. We were making ends meet, and we're paying people, we're feeding, we employed people. And so every dollar counted. So with that type of mentality, that's how I kind of approach the federal government, that you need to track the pennies, the nickels, the dimes, and the whole 9 yards. Talking about nickels and dimes and pennies, it costs more to make a penny than the penny's worth in and of itself. So let's just get rid of pennies. That's a waste. That's a waste right there. Don't get me started on stuff like that. But talking about as far as my side of the house and what we experienced and what I went through, you need to track those things. And if I have to track it for me, if I have to track it for my business, I expect the same attention to detail when it comes to our government and the services that they provide as well. Terry says, sent you an email on food stamps. Let me see if I can pull that up. We'll see what goes on here. And people are wondering, how did he send him an email? It's like, I got my email address out there. It's official, thevariedlife@gmail.com. And, he also sent me something else earlier. I'll have to check that out. Interesting. Terry says the majority of food stamp recipients are foreigners. Veritha says, take it to your personal budget. If your total income is $5,000, Social Security program equivalent costs you $1,100 a month, 3 to 5. I wish I'd stay up longer. 3 to 5% waste on that is 30 to 55 a month, about 1.1%. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been on that edge of trying to make it to the end of the month, that $35, $33, $55 a month would make the difference on whether we would be in the red or whether we would be in the black for the business or even my home finances. There's that fiscal responsibility that you need to have, that we had anyway, and I expect the same thing from our government. It's 1.1%. Whoop-de-doo. It's like, well, it's the difference between not being able to pay the light bill or paying it, or having the water shut off or not, or being able to buy food, or having to go to a church food pantry. That 1.1% is a huge difference. So, and especially when you're talking about business, 1.1%, $33, $55 a month. I'd say $55 a month. Multiply that by 12. And if that's a loss for a business on a small business, it might not seem like a lot of money, which to most people it's not. But when you are trying to make ends meet, that's a lot of money. At least, in the businesses that I've been involved in. That's what I mean with it doesn't even make a dent. Yes, it's bad, but fighting it just isn't financially sensible. But with AI and the computers that we have, think back to the 1940s, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and things like that, where you had a pool of people, 100 people working. And now you can have computers, you have AI, you have all these things that multitasking, things like that. So that pool of 100 people that used to do 100 different jobs can now be reduced into a smaller workforce, and you can get more done with less. It's just the way of the world. You have more accountability. You have things that are automated that you no longer need Joe Schmo to get paid for him to do audits. It can all be done electronically, in what we did in the Department of Corrections that I worked with. We had systems in place where you could scrub, it would automatically scrub databases and show this is how much this person got paid, and this is how much, for this, and blah, blah, blah. And if there's any oversight that comes into play, there's systems in place to throw up a red flag and say, hey, we're getting an unexpected expenditure within our maintenance department. Let's check that out and see what's going on. Because at the time, there's some people who defrauded the Department of Corrections. And we found it through the automated, auditing that they had. So, there's that. Ferrith says, normal companies would call that a write-off. Yeah, the days of the write-offs, just write it off. I don't have experience with that because we couldn't write anything off because we didn't make enough to hit the write-off level. So that's why we had to focus and track every penny, nickel, and dime. But yeah. But getting back to that $30 to $55 a month back would cost you money. You don't get to keep those. You don't get to keep those $50. But getting that $33 to $50 would. But if it was something that was going out, $55 that was going out, and that $55 made a difference whether it was in the red or in the black, with my businesses that I did and the small business or side gigs, it made a difference on whether I had the lights turned off or not. So I kind of get what you're talking about. But still, you should be fiscally responsible for your money. At least for me, anyway. That's my wife is even more fiscally responsible than me. I mean, she will track that stuff down to the penny. And that was invaluable when we had our business. When we were struggling after I got out of the military, And it's just like, oh, I don't know if we're going to make it. And then there was things that was like, okay, well, we need a budget. We need to do this. And then we had some other stuff that popped up. Well, that's an unnecessary expense. Or she found out some other times that we got charged twice on credit cards, and I didn't catch it. She caught it. And so she was able to get and say, hey, wait a second, you charged us twice for this. You need to give us back that money. Well, that money made the difference. Huge difference at that time. So, yeah. Terry says, I remember in the Air Force paying our bills and getting food, and we had to stretch $20 till the next payday. I know, right? Here's something that's really interesting. I remember being in the military, and we would have barbecues and potlucks and things like that as a way to help service members and their families stretch their dollar. Absolutely true. Now, should the military have paid a living wage? Absolutely, and there's no doubt about that. But we did that stuff. People would come together and have potlucks because we knew that Joe Johnny and his wife and the newborn kid or whatever weren't able to make it off of their pay. So we would all come together and we would have barbecue and potlucks. And then it was like, hey, oh man, we got too much food. Hey, and we pack it up. Hey, take this home. I've got too much of this. So we did our own little welfare system at the time. And, that's how it worked back then. But unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that today. And matter of fact, what we do see in the United States is you have private people that are trying to provide free food for people. They get arrested for providing food. I worked with homeless. I did prison ministry for a number of years, did outreach for homeless and those who were hungry, worked with food pantries and things like that. And it amazed me that we had people that would go to Walmart. They would buy prepackaged food, not food that you had to cook or make because, health regulations. No, we're talking about like Lunchables. We're talking about packaged food where you don't open the package. I just buy packages of prepackaged food, give it to a homeless person who's hungry, and people got arrested. I remember when churches used to do that as well, but now not many churches do that. And then, of course, you don't even get me started about the conspiracy of the 501c3 nonprofit organizations, which we won't even go into that. But I mean, there used to be more public charity than there is nowadays. And when the government takes over that stuff, it is usually not as efficient and there's more fraud than there is with private charities. Not saying that private charities all are squeaky clean, but based on my experience, we've created rules to where you can't, as a private citizen, even give prepackaged food to people that are hungry. People get arrested for it. I've seen it. So tell me something's not wrong. Something is seriously wrong. Ferrith says, what I meant is when you want those $30 to $55 back by getting rid of the waste, you need now to hire people to find that, which costs you money. Yeah, we talked about that. You need to hire, but with the automation and now that you have AI and then you have systems in place or programs that can automatically flag expenditures like double expenditures. We had something similar to that in the Department of Corrections. Matter of fact, we would have things, databases, and that if an expenditure happened twice, in other words, double billed, it would automatically flag and send an email and say, hey, boom, here, you got this double charge. And with the Department of Corrections in the state of Colorado, we saved a ton of money. It didn't require hiring a bunch of people. It just required somebody doing some code and hooking up to our database, and it's a one and done deal. And that saved the state. Yeah, a little insignificant, a little 1% here, whatever. might seem insignificant, but when you're talking department wide, and at the end of the year, it saved a significant amount of taxpayer money, which instead of being wasted, could now actually be used for what it, instead of raising taxes because of fraud, waste, and abuse, we don't have to raise the taxes as much. Again, it's fiscal responsibility. I told people my wife married me for my money, all $595 a month. That brings back memories. Ferrith says, I just think investing all that effort to get that 1% back when we have a 36% deficit while giving it out like candy via tax breaks. How was that last little bit? Giving it out like candy via tax breaks just does not make sense. There's other variables that come into play. You can talk about tax breaks for businesses. If the business is there and they get some tax breaks, but then they're supplying 5,000 jobs, then the tax breaks could be good. If you don't offer the tax breaks and that business goes to another state where they can get tax breaks, and then you don't have 5,000 jobs available through that business because they went to another state. So I think there's things to where tax breaks make sense, but then there's also, I totally get your point, because tax breaks can be way too much. But there needs to be a balance, just like anything in life. There needs to be a balance. But trying to say, well, I don't think being fiscally responsible of investing all the effort to get back that 1 or 2% or 3 or 7%, when we're giving out tax breaks, that's kind of like picking an either or. It doesn't make sense. We need to, you're just going to let $500 billion go because somebody's getting tax breaks, and we just let the fraud, waste, and abuse continue? No, that would be like, it doesn't make sense. And again, on a personal level, if I've got unaccounted for spending in my budget, and it's like, it's only 1, it's only 3, it's only 7%, no big deal, over time, that can be problematic because it's going to put us behind in regards to retirement. We're not going to be able to save up for short or medium-term savings and things like that. We might not be able to get, X, Y, and Z, the things that we want to do because of the added expense of that fraud, waste, and abuse. So I think we need to be fiscally responsible in all areas of money. But when it comes up to tax breaks, let's say if you have a company that provides 10,000 jobs, and the thing is, hey, you need to give us a little bit of a tax break. If you don't, we're going to go to another state that is going to give us some tax breaks. Well, 10,000 jobs, you're paying a living wage. That's a good thing, because all those people are going to be paying taxes. Yeah, the business might get some tax breaks, but they're still going to pay some taxes. But the thing is that you're going to have 10,000 people that are employed. You got 10,000 people that are not going to be using the welfare system. You got 10,000 people that are going to be able to start saving and have a long, medium, and short-term saving. They're going to be able to invest in IRAs. They're going to be able to make their lives better, with good financial decisions. That's the caveat. You have people that don't do that they don't provide and look down the road and see that they need to retire. So, but then again, like I said, tax breaks can get woefully crazy, But then you need to look at the globalization. You need to look at the world we live in. And it used to be, jobs are in the United States, and that's all U.S. jobs were. Well, now you have companies that are taking and saying, hey, we're going to take our jobs and we're going to go overseas because of high taxation and because we don't get tax breaks. So there's always the pro and con to both of those things. There's just so many different variables, and I don't think you can take one and say, well, this is a thing, and the fraud, waste, and abuse, we don't need to be concerned with that because of tax breaks. It's kind of like it's an either or type of thing. I think each thing needs to be looked at independently, and then as a whole, and then whether you're going to be in the red or whether you're going to be in the black, kind of like what I would do with my personal household budget. I don't know. Is that the way the government should work? I'm not sure. I don't know. I just know what works for me and my budget. So Terry says you can use AI to find it, and you don't need all those people. That's true. Yeah, like the software thing that we had that looked for double payments, and that saved a lot of money. We actually got an award for coming up with that. What's the error rate of AI? If it's 1%, it gets rid of your 1% waste and creates 1% of waste by making mistakes. But if it finds 99% of the fraud, the payoff's pretty good. Until, there's no perfect system. But essentially what you're saying is that if there's a 1% failure rate with AI, that means there's a 99% success. So taking that into consideration, you have to say, well, what is the success rate of stopping fraud, waste, and abuse without AI? Well, it's not in the previous examples, like I said, when you get into the hundreds of millions or $500 billion plus dollars, 99% of 500 billion is what? That's still a pretty good return on something that if AI comes in and once it's instituted, kind of like the software thing that we had for our department for double charges, something as simple as that. And, we're talking about, in our maintenance and what we did, we had electronics maintenance, you had plumbing, you had mechanical, you had electrical, what was some of the other things? You had fiberglass, you had the tag plant, you had a number of other, the furniture plant, all those things. When we instituted that and showed that that worked on our level of saying, hey, we're doing industrial work. We're doing industrial work, plumbing, electronics, all of that stuff, and how much we could save as just one department. And they were like, holy crap, let's expand this out to the plumbers, electricians, this group, that department, this one. Hell, let's even get it into the food service. When they ordered food, well, they found out that they were being double charged a number of times as well. So that one thing, now, was the program 100% all the time? No. But it was it was enough to make a big enough difference to where it was like, hey, we saved the taxpayers a significant amount of money instead of just pissing it away. So that's just based on what I see in my experience. Let's see. Fairtha says Trump just increased the tax breaks on big business, and everyone is laying off people left and right, and companies are raking in record profits. Trickle down doesn't work. Dang it. Trickle down doesn't work. Tried that like 5 times. Yeah, the trickle down economics. I remember that. Yeah. And like I said, there needs to be balance in tax breaks as well. With people laying people off, but then we're also in a bad economy right now. So, there's that to take into consideration. But I totally get your point on that. In that, but then again, in a bad economy, that's when people get laid off. So, but yeah, the trickle down doesn't work. I mean, but there are some good things about tax breaks. But if you go too one-sided, it's obviously not good. But then if you go to the other side of the coin and you have zero tax breaks and have none whatsoever, that can also be detrimental as well. Fairtha says, you said it best. When you were making a little money, you stretched every dollar, but you did everything to get a promotion to increase your income meaningfully instead of pinching every penny. Wait a second. What was that? To get a promotion to increase your income meaningfully instead of just pinching every penny. Again, that's an either or type of thing. I did both. It's not like I did everything to get a promotion so I wouldn't have to pinch pennies. I got promoted and pushed for early promotions, which I got on every single promotion. I still pinched pennies. Again, we tracked it down to the penny, nickel, dime. My wife was notorious. I mean, she could be a financial forensic accountant in what you could find. And it's like, where did the 7 cents go? And it didn't stop after I got promoted. I'll promise you that. It still hasn't stopped, okay? But we did both because we realized that, hey, if you don't track the money's going to go away. And if you don't track the money and you pinch the pennies, and again, the whole reason for pinching pennies is to say, okay, well, we don't need this, and we're going to put this where? Oh, we're going to pay off our debts. Oh, we're going to take this penny and this penny and this penny and this penny. We're going to pay off our mortgage. And we're going to take this and this and this and this, and we're going to put it towards retirement. Even though that I got promoted. I could have just been like a number of people in the military and said, I got promoted. I'm just going to spend like there's no tomorrow and I don't need to pinch pennies anymore. Guess what? Those people aren't as well off as me and my wife, or those who do pinch pennies and took those pennies and put them into things that made sense in paying off debts and saving for retirement. But no, you got guys that promoted and it was like all they did was go further into debt. There was guys that I knew on every single promotion. They would get a new car. They would get a new motorcycle. They would get a new bass boat. They would spend it on this and that. And zero would go towards savings and retirement. And they retired, and they had a shitload of debt. When we retired, we were debt-free. And we had money to retire. And granted, we went overseas because it's less expensive, but we were able to retire early. So it took both. You got to bust your ass and you got to pinch the pennies. And with that, the next thing is you have to put it into things that make sense. You know, paying down your debt, paying down your mortgage if you have a mortgage, putting money in investment like Roth IRAs or investment vehicles, you know, that is common sense. I'm not talking crypto and crazy stuff and whatever. I mean, just the Barney basics will put you into a position that's way better than most people will ever experience. But they don't do that because what they end up doing is they get the promotion, they just spend like no tomorrow, and they don't, your promotion, they got like a 20% increase in pay. Do they take any amount of that and put it towards savings or retirement? No, they just blow the whole thing, which is asininely stupid. Every time you get a promotion, it's like that would up our savings and how much we would put in savings. Every little bit, you know, that little increase on whatever it was, okay, well, that is going to go towards retirement. And that's going to increase our retirement. For every year that I got a promotion, a little bit more money went into the kitty for retirement, and so on and so forth. I can't tell you the number of service members that did not do that are retired, that are still massively in debt, because they don't know how to pinch the pennies and they don't know where to put the pennies once they pinch them. So, let's see. To the AI comment, if the AI had 100% success rate, but also 1% chance to make a mistake, that means you get all the fraud out of the system. Dang it, why does this keep going so fast? Out of all the system, but also creates 1% of waste from AI errors. But what are the number of errors with what we have now? It's obviously a lot worse. And over time, eventually, AI will get up close to 100%. But it's way far better than what we have now, or you have systems that have no accountability whatsoever. Again, going back to kind of like the double charge thing, that you know, simple little program, and it later got expounded upon, you know, for different things, you know, but it's ever growing, and we saved the department a ton of money. And when we did our side business in real estate and rehabbing homes, you know, to be able to stop the double charges, boom, simple little thing, ding, and that was just on an Excel spreadsheet. It wasn't a mass outlay. Faritha says, you did both exactly what I'm talking about, increase income and pinch. Okay, yeah, right. The U.S. is currently pinching pennies and reducing income at the same time. Yeah. You need to be able to either maintain the income, and if you maintain the income, then you need to find ways to cut expenses to keep you in the black and not out in the red. But Yeah, increasing the income, that is something I think every country, even here in Korea, they're trying to do that as well. So, but yeah, don't get me started on insurance companies. And the reason that, or college, oh, good Lord. As soon as, politicians did the dope deal for college loans and how those can't get written off, it's just forever an albatross around your neck, kind of like medical debt. Holy crow, how is that even possible? Of course, when you have insurance, and then when you have tuition loans to get people into college, all of a sudden college costs and books went through the roof for no apparent reason whatsoever. Oh, yeah. Don't get me started. Talking about reducing income. If you increase the cost of college and books and the whole 9 yards, and insurance, medical insurance, holy crap. Don't even get me started on that. Just the differences in the medical that we pay here in Korea versus the United States is insane. And a lot of the overcharges and the high prices that we experience in the United States is because of insurance. And it's like, well, insurance is going to pay this much. Well, we were only charging this much, so we're going to charge this much. And then through a series of increases over time, insurance keeps going up, and then billing companies and medical keeps going up to meet that because they want to make money as well. So, I don't know. Those character limits in these comments makes it really hard to get the whole point across in one comment. I know, right? That's why we need to have coffee. That's why we need to y'all need to come to Korea, because I'm not going back to the United States. Y'all need to come to Korea. We hit a coffee shop. We'll go get some Hanu beef. Oh, it is to die for. And then after that, we'll have a few beers. We'll have some coffee, some lattes or whatever, and then we'll just hammer out the world's problems, and we won't have these problems with comments and minimal characters. But I get what you're saying, therapist. I totally get it. I think we're on the same page of most of what. Yeah, we are. It's just with the small comments, it's like it's hard to really say anything when you have limited amount of comments. So yeah, I totally get it. Maybe we should do a podcast. We could just talk for hours and hours. No. Terry says there are doctors who will add another code that didn't even do an exam and submit it to Medicare and Medicaid. Oh yeah, my daughter's a doctor. Yeah, those are things. Of course, my daughter's a military doctor, so they don't deal with Medicare or Medicaid, but she worked in civilian hospitals when she was in the United States, and oh yeah, it is a thing. It is, yeah, my daughter does not like it. George pops in and says, 4-year colleges, unless they are for a specific purpose, are a scam. Yeah, trade schools. I'm a big proponent of trade schools. And I've been saying that for decades. And it's finally coming to fruition now. You're going to get people that trade schools are going to be the way to go. That you want to make money? Holy crow, go to a trade school. Hell, even inmates that we would put through trades in the Colorado Department of Corrections were making, $30, $40, $60 an hour after getting out of prison. And it was all in trades. Trade schools are awesome. Terry says, I'll be there in March. Hey, we can have coffee. We can do that. Fairtha says, I'm very lucky having good insurance through my employer. All year long, I'm still looking to cut my prescription costs and copays. I know, right? I still do the same thing too. Was very successful this year. We'll save like $1,000 next year. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, insurance. Ugh. It's kind of like property tax. Good Lord. Don't get me started on property tax. How can people, this is another thing that pisses me off. I know we're way past the retired in Korea stuff. You have people that worked or built their house, paid it off. Why are they still paying property tax? Look at the history of property tax and what that was initially for, or income tax for that matter. That was supposed to be a temporary thing. But property tax, there's people who have lost their homes that were hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property because grandma or grandpa just suddenly couldn't, lost track of the property tax and then the home was taken away from them. That should never be a thing. I am so against property tax. There's other ways that you can get tax money, but if you have seen, and then these same people, the politicians complain about, oh, we need to take care of our seniors, and it's like, well, yeah, stop, don't have property tax. If I buy this thing here and I pay tax on it once, that's all there is. I shouldn't have to be taxed on this every single year because I own it and I paid it off. It should be mine. I shouldn't have to pay tax on it. Instead of this, just think of a house. So, I don't know. That's the way I think. I don't know. Fairtha says, I'm very lucky having a good insurance through my employer all year long. Oh, yeah, we just did that one. That's good. I think more, with that, I think we're going to see more companies that are going to be shedding off of this corporate juggernaut of insurance, and you're going to get people that are going to have better deals and realize that they can provide a good service and make money at the same time and not, slaughter the cow. You can get the milk and be happy, but they want to slaughter the cow every time, and it's hard on people. But I think there's going to be more companies that are going to do stuff like that, and with lower co-pays, better terms of service on insurance and health insurance and things like that. But yeah, and there's entire groups dedicated to insurance and explaining, hey, do this company, not that company, and this is the coverage you get. You get, all the different nuances of medical insurance, and thankfully with social media, and we can get this information out to people, and people can become educated instead of just like, this is the insurance I got, and this is how much I got to pay, and that's it. Some people don't even know that you can shop around for medical insurance. There's some older people. It's like, what? You can shop around medical? I didn't know that. Terry says young electricians are making around $60 an hour. Yeah, in Denver, Colorado, they were at the time that we left 4 years ago. Yeah, you could make $40, even $60 an hour. CBGB. Finally sold everything in the USA, now living in West Japan in a small city, and here until they bury my bones. Congratulations. We are neighbors now, buddy. Hey. Faritha says, I know the anti-property tax arguments, but the roads still need upkeep when my house is paid off. The school still needs to pay its teachers, and I still need police and firefighters. Yeah, I get that, but before there was property tax, they were able to do that. All I'm saying is that there's other ways to skin a cat. So, and whether I pay it through property tax or pay it through, add another 1% onto the state tax, it shouldn't be a vehicle in which we can take somebody's home away from them because they didn't pay, oh, you were short $20 on your property tax. Again, property tax is overreach in my opinion. And I totally agree that we need to pay for roads and schools and fire, police, emergency services. Being that I was in that arena, I totally get it. But there's other ways to do that instead of taking away people's homes because, something got lost and grandma lost her $500,000 home. Yeah. Just tax in a different way. George says, that is where gas tax and a sales tax comes in. Yeah, something like that. I'm fixing to file paperwork under the law in Texas says I'm over 65 and I don't have to pay school taxes anymore. That's around $3,000 a year savings. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, there's other ways that you can make up differences. and I'm just on the side that, okay, can we take somebody's house away from them if they didn't pay their property tax, and the state makes an obscene amount of money because they took the house and they sold it for a profit? I think that's as wrong as the day is long. Like Fairtha says, we need to pay for roads. We need to pay for emergency services and so on and so forth. Fire departments. Those are roads. Until you don't have roads, I had friends that lived out in the sticks, and I would go and yeah, where roads are barely maintained. Holy crow! You don't know appreciation for roads until you go visit some of my friends in the States. But there's other things that you can do besides taking somebody's home in that manner because they didn't pay property tax. And it just rubs me the wrong way. Fairtha says, getting rid of school districts and funding public schools through state taxes, I'm all for that. But absolutely money-wise, I think we all just need to pay the same in the end. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of yeah, totally. But I also believe that the schools need to be revamped as well, because tons of money goes into administration and very little of that trickles down into the classroom to the teachers and the students that actually need it. And when you have, school time rolls around and then you have this school shopping list that includes tissue paper, pens, markers, this and that, all the stuff that used to be paid for when I went to school, and suddenly now no longer a thing these days, because now why do I have to bring in paper towels? Why do I have to bring in sanitary wipes? It's not like my kid's going to use it. I've had parents tell me that, yeah, they got to get sanitary wipes, they got to do tissues, they got to do paper towels and all of this stuff and tape and all of this. And it's like, my kid doesn't use any of that during the year. So who the hell uses that? Is it the teachers? If teachers need it, I get that. But when I was growing up in the United States, you didn't have these school shopping lists that you need to do every year. That was provided by the schools. But then when you look at the schools, oh, it's for the children. We need more money. We need more taxes. We need to raise taxes for schools and education. Well, if you look at that and you look at the stats and you see that tons of money went to administration and very little goes down to where it actually counts, teachers and students. It's like, well, wait a second. We could probably cut that in half or more, the administration, and we can get that money actually into the classrooms. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. Old whippersnappers just wasting our money. Yeah, getting rid of school districts and funding public schools through state taxes. Yeah, absolute money. I think we just all have to pay the same in the end. Yeah, I mean, you got to. I think you brought it up before. You got to pay to play, but another interesting thing that pops up is now you have online schools. So kids don't even need to go to a brick and mortar place to learn. It can all be done in the comfort of your own home. And I dare say you could probably get a better education by doing that. You have companies out there that have curriculum that you can say, hey, I want high standards for my child. What are your standards for your curriculum? And and you have companies out there that are providing world-class education. And you can all do it at home. And I know the bad thing about homeschool kids are socially awkward or whatever. There's ways to get around that. The majority of homeschool kids that I've met have been, wow, I'm severely impressed. And they're not socially awkward. And their education level is, I've known kids that have gone through homeschool, never spent a day in a brick and mortar school and got full ride scholarships. Not so much with most other public schools. So, yeah, but then there's always, the outliers on the other side of the coin. You got people that are homeschooled that, are dumb as a bag of hammers. So, but seeing that we can get an education online. You can get college education online now. And that kind of begs the question, well, why are college costs so expensive? It's kind of like lighting. We got lighting here. And we changed lighting from one lamp to another lamp to another lamp, for energy efficiency and CFS bulbs. And now we're on to LED bulbs and everything. It's supposed to save a ton of money, which it does, but our electric rates are still going up each and every year. So really, does it matter? Well, yeah, it matters because I don't have to pay as much as electricity, but I mean, the rates keep going up and up and up. I don't know. Terry says, before 1919 and income tax, the government supported itself soft with tariffs. Good point. Yeah, and we could print our own, the Constitution says we can print our own money. We don't have to borrow to print our own money like we do now. Won't even get into that. CB says, if you drive a car, I'll tax the street. If you try to sit, I'll tax your seat. If you're too cold, I'll tax the heat. If you take a walk, I'll tax your feet. The tax man. Death and taxes. Yeah, I don't know. What do they say? The only two things for sure in life is death and taxes. Ferris says, I'm against homeschooling. Socialization and school standards are very difficult to enforce. We only hear about the successes, never about all the failures. There's a lot of failures. That's true. But the ones I've seen in homeschooling. But then that requires, and here's the caveat, I think Ferris would agree, is that as a parent that is doing homeschooling, you need to be on top of those things and make sure that your child does get proper socialization, that they're not socially awkward, that they know how to, so they need to, and have interaction with other kids. I remember when homeschooling basically first started, and it was few and far between. And those kids were, they're a little out there. They weren't socially adjusted well. Some of them were, because they interacted with the parents, but then that's the thing is, you had to rely on the parents, and were they smart enough to teach the kids? Most parents aren't. So it didn't end up being, they didn't get a real high quality education. But with online education now, hell, you can get Harvard, you can attend Harvard classes for free and get a Harvard education. Granted, you won't get the diploma, but I mean, you can get high school. You can get a high school education, middle school, junior high, and high school education online with all of the resources for minimal amount that you would pay in a public school, and you get a much better education, and there's more accountability depending on the company that you go with. It's no longer reliant or dependent upon the adult and how smart, the adult is. If you got some dumb adults and dumb parents, I know how that goes. I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer. I would not want to do homeschooling for my kid because my education only goes up a certain level, and I know that more is required. But now you have online training where you have lectures and teachers and the whole 9 yards. Everything is done online. And the amount of money that it costs is next to nothing compared to the bloatedness that we have with public school education. And this giant monster that we have that's called administration. You start looking at the stats of that. I did that as one of my college classes on talking about abuse, fraud, waste, and abuse within the public education system was one of the papers that I ended up writing. And tracking the administration and costs and so on and so forth, and how it became so like an iceberg, that very little money went to the teachers, and teachers who haven't gotten raises, for years and don't have a living wage, and students where, now you have students from bringing in notebooks and papers and copy paper. Copy paper, seriously? The schools should be providing that. But no, we don't. We want more administrators. And with this huge influx of administration within the public school system, how have our grades, how do we match as a nation against other countries? Where's our math, science, and reading and comprehension scores? They're in the crapper. But we've got a kick-ass administration. We fund that like no tomorrow, but just don't look for results because we don't have them. It used to be in the United States, you would graduate high school, you could immediately go into college. Now you have college classes for people that are getting out of high school that are teaching remedial reading, remedial math. They will do 1 to 2 years of remedial schooling before they can even take one college level class. But then I'll blame the No Child Left Behind. We're just going to pass them all. We're going to reduce the amount of homework that they have because, oh, they're delicate. I don't know. Again, don't get me started. Tuition is so high because the government approves all the loans they get. Yeah, exactly. I mean, crazy. Terry says, Texas passed school choice and set up savings account where parents can pay for homeschool or private schools. They passed $2 billion for teachers' pay raises, but in most, dang it, seriously? Let's go back. Passed $2 billion for teachers' pay raises, but most of the money did get to them. Well, that's good. Did get to them? It went to school board and staff raises instead of teachers. So it didn't go to them. Oh, okay. Well, that sucks. Yeah, the administration gets rich and they get a ton of money, computers and desks and offices and, brand new buildings. But the money doesn't trickle down, kind of like what Ferris was saying, that trickle down type of thing, from the Reagan administration. The trickle down economics, that doesn't work in education either. So I just find it disingenuous that, we don't like trickle down economics, but then we want to over and hyper fund the administration in hopes that it will trickle down to the teachers and the students, which it doesn't. So I just find that hypocritical. CB says, Abby Zwerner was a teacher shot by a 6-year-old student last week. She was awarded $10 million in a civil suit. Oh, shot by a 6-year-old? What? Did she sue the parents in a civil suit? Or holy crow. Did she sue the school district? I don't know. I haven't heard that. Veritha says, school choice is really helping out people who are already sending their kids to private school, but really hurt people who cannot afford it because it reduces funding for public schools. Yeah, there's that. But then if there's no we also know that competition can breed success. So, or is it that we just have an outdated school system that sucks because everything goes to administration and we're not getting the results that we're promised every single year that they want to raise taxes. Oh, we're doing it for the children or, for their education or whatever. Do you just continually and perpetuate that system that is having horrible results? People, are going to get hurt because funding doesn't go to public schools. But then there's public schools, at least in the United States, where there's schools where it's like you can't fire teachers no matter how bad they are. Drunks roaming the halls, teachers who are drunk. You have teachers that have been put on administrative leave that are still getting paid because they were drunk, because they got DUIs, because they got problems. But the unions have such a stranglehold over the school systems that they can't be fired. Something needs to change. CB says she sued the principal. Oh, wow. So the school system and the principal. But I think Virginia will cover the costs. Holy crow, $10 million. The people graduating with a $100,000 gender studies degree complaining they can't find a job. But isn't that always the case? I mean, I think back to when I was in high school, and then you had college classes, the basket weaving classes, the underwater basket weaving classes, the Woodstock hippie type of stuff that kind of crawled into, and especially it really went off after the government did their little deal. The politicians did deals with, the lobbyists and the loan companies that would do student loans and how that got approved. Don't even get into that. And then you started having all these areas of study within college that you can't get a job in. Why would you? Like, case in point, I just saw a video of that guy on YouTube, Caleb Hammer. White guy, got glasses, and he does a financial audit on people and their personal budgets and why they're in debt. And these people volunteer to go on the show. Well, this one lady, I wouldn't say lady, I say she's a young woman, that she went to college, got a 4-year degree in Chicano studies, and then complains that she can't get a job. It's like, well, why did you go into debt? And this is what he asked: why did you go into debt for something that you can't get a job in? I wanted to connect with my roots, was her answer. And it's like, you went into debt to connect with your Chicano roots. And he's like, you could have just went to library and read some books. and there used to be a time in the United States where it's like you go to college and that would kind of cement that you would get a good job, which would mean you get with a good company, which means you would get a pension and you have a good retirement and the 2.4 kids and a dog, the whole 9 yards, you'd be good. That was the pathway, the American dream. But then after college loans started coming out and the lobbyists got their hands on the politicians and there was a little bit of greasing of palms, that all of a sudden college loans became a thing. Boom, that exploded. College tuition went through the roof. Books went through the roof. Then you started having degrees that had absolutely no job prospects like we see today. And it's like, yeah, but you spent $50, $60, $100,000 on a degree, and you're in debt with double-digit interest rates on that debt that you can't pay because you can't find a job. And I mean, growing up, like I said, I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. I was more like a spork, maybe, just barely above a spoon. But even I knew back then, 17 years old, you go to college, you look for a job that pays well, and then you look for and say, okay, well, what are the requirements for this high-paying job? Okay, well, these are the requirements. You're going to need this degree or whatever it is. And then you go, okay, well, I'm going to go to school for that. And I'll get that so that I can go get that job. And the prospects, the estimates are saying, hey, this is a growing field in the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah, that's what I'm going to go for. We don't do that anymore. We just get whatever degree we want to find ourselves, to express. And then, but that comes at a price. There's the debt. You go into debt, and then you have people complaining, well, I've got a 4-year degree and I got, 6-8 years in college and I can't pay it off and I'm in debt and I can't find a job, but I'm a barista or whatever. And it's like, what's your degree in? And then they tell you the degree and it's like, well, what job did you think you were going to get with that degree? And it's like, they just did it just to get educated. There was no thought in regards to, I'm going to use this as a vehicle for me to get a good job. That is like a huge thing. And it's just like, holy crow. And as you just step back and you look at what degrees there were 20, 30 years ago versus the degrees that are available today, and which ones carry over to jobs and which ones don't. Ooh. But it's all under this guise of education. Well, I got an education. Whoop-de-doo. What was that movie? Good Will Hunting, where the scene with Matt Damon, and he's in the college bar, and he's like, hey, and he's having that discussion with the supposed, college kid, and says, hey, you could have got all that with a library card and, a couple bucks in late fees. And he says, and then at the end of your life, you're probably going to find out that you didn't think for yourself or something along those lines. And that you're just regurgitating this and that. And until next year, you're going to be saying this and this, where the Commonwealth of what, it goes through that whole spiel. And it's like, yeah, I mean, education just for in and of itself to become enlightened, that is a recent thing. Whereas getting a degree to be a doctor or getting a degree to be an engineer or an architect or whatever it is, you had these hard, fast, tangible areas of which your degree would help you get that job in that sector. And now we don't have a lot of that. Hey, Zombie Hunter's there. Hey guys. Faritha says, it's a free market. If there's demand for these degrees for profit universities, they will offer them. Exactly right. Leading to a secure job is not part of their business model. I know, that's the problem. They sell the dream of being educated. You need to get educated. You need to get a degree. And you can do this, just sign this paper over here, and we will fund not only your tuition, your books, hell, we'll pay for your food, we'll pay for your lodging. You need a living stipend? Oh, we'll wrap that up into the loan as well. You can even draw more money if you want. Loan companies do that. And these kids are too stupid and they sign their name without reading a contract. Holy crap, some of them are paying 30, 40% interest rates. This is insane. And then you'll get the ones that'll pay the minimum payments and then you never be able to pay off their student loans because they make the minimum payments, which only pays the interest. And even then there's some fees it'll even grow if you only pay the minimum payments because they don't read the contract. I mean, I'm all for a free market but a person needs to have a little bit of a 2 cents to be able to read and say, hey, is this going to help me in my endeavor of getting a good job? I think the hype is that people have been sold the hype of, oh, just get any education and that will further you in life. And it's like, no. A degree in basket weaving is, or whatever thing that's going on, it's like, no, there are no jobs for that degree. And you spent 4, 6, 8 years studying and you can't get a job in that, but you still have to pay back the loan. Hell, there's people that don't even know how to figure out the interest on their loans. There was a guy that I worked with, I swear to God. There's a guy I worked with, my boss, one of my bosses anyway. Let me get some comments first and I'll get back to that. It says, when banks handed college loans, it was simple interest. Government loans compounded daily, so you never bring the principal down. That's why they tell you if you can't pay it off in 25 years, they will forgive it. Yeah, which is crazy. George says, the worst part is the same people that accumulate massive student loan debt for a degree that amount to nothing are the ones demanding that everyone else should have to pay for it. Yeah, I mean, true. There's a lot of people that do that. So I'll be, hey, Fairfish, Terry, George says, howdy. But going back to this one boss I had, you're going to love this story. You're going to love this story. This guy was older than me. He was my boss in a Department of Corrections. He was a captain. I was a lieutenant. He was very smart in some things, but then he was very dumb in a lot of other things. And I could say the same for myself. But when it came to finances, holy grow, he was an idiot. So he went to get an education. But he actually got an education in something that he could use so that he could get a job and get a better salary, which makes sense. So he was good on that part. The problem was he did a student loan. And he got some more student loans and some more student loans. He then thought it would be a good idea to wrap up all those student loans into one loan. So he had one payment instead of multiple loan payments. Okay, I can see that. If the interest rate is lower and so you have a lower payment every month, I could see doing that. he did not. And for 10 years, he paid the minimum payments on his loan. His college debt grew because he never paid anything on the principal. After 10 years, I can't remember the amount, but it was an amount that would make you say, oh my God, why? Didn't you read the contract? Didn't you ask them and say, hey, well, what's my payment going to be? Because all he was concerned about was the payment. He didn't care about the interest. He didn't care about, well, how much is going towards the principal out of this payment. Oh, there's nothing on the minimum payment that is going to principal? As a matter of fact, it's going to add interest to the principal. It's going to add to the debt that I have. He never asked those questions. And so for 10 years, he paid the minimum payment. And then he came to work one day and he's like, oh my gosh, I owe more than what my college loans were worth. And it's like, well, what are you talking about? Me and this other guy were sitting in there, we're having a coffee, we were talking. And he's like, yeah. And so he laid it all out and told us. And it was just like, you didn't read the contract? Well, yeah, the payment was lower. You didn't read the contract? Because it was kind of like those sleazy used car salesmen, you know. Oh, I'm going to get you into a car, and what's your payment? Might be for 7 to 10 years, but we're going to get you into that car, and you're going to pay 2 or 3 times the amount of the worth of the car. That's basically what it ended up doing. Holy crow. It's like, you never paid extra on it. You never paid, you know, he never even asked the question if he could pay extra on the principal. Holy crow. Some of the dumbest, smartest people I know. Let's see. Terry says, if you don't pay back your loan, they'll put a lien on your Social Security in your home. Yeah, right. Life is hard, but when you're stupid, it's harder. That's all I'm going to say. They need to get young kids to take out the student loans, and they have no clue. It's the biggest scam, but it's legal. Yeah, it is. It is absolutely legal. It's not ethical, but it's legal. And the thing is, there's such a huge difference between when I went to school. I'm doing that old man thing. Well, when I went to school, things were different. We learned how to read and write and do arithmetic and comprehend and do interest and amortization and budgets and, you know, history and all of those things. They taught home budgeting. They taught business. They taught how to figure interest on a loan for cars and houses and the whole 9 yards. So I remember going through those classes thinking, this is stupid. When am I ever going to buy a home? But it stuck with me. And so when I bought homes, and I never bought a car, brand new car, never had a loan on a car. But when I did, I was able to say, well, hey, we've got this loan program and you'd be able to buy this house and blah, 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 blah. And here's the payment. And it's like, well, what's the interest rate? And can I prepay on the mortgage? And can I pay it off early? And is there any, you know, I could ask all of the important questions to say, okay, yeah, then no, I don't like that, you know. And many times, you know, when we did go shopping for a car and we were considering about financing a car, there was like so much stuff on there. It was like, no, I'm not going to do that. What do you mean there's a prepayment penalty? There's a penalty if I pay the car off early. No way. You know, but now kids don't know how to do that. They have no clue whatsoever. You tell them to figure out, they can't even figure out simple interest for the most part. They don't know how to budget. They don't know how to do a business plan. They don't know how to, you know, all of the things that at least I did when I was growing up and going through school. These kids can't do them today. Hell, they have a hard time spelling words and writing them correctly. Sentence structure's out the window, you know, but that could be because of texting or whatever. But we've replaced all of those things, the important things that I had when I was growing up and going through school, and we've replaced them with things that are like, I don't even want to get into it. Good Lord. It's crazy. And then these kids will sign these loan documents, the student loans and the cars and the houses and worse yet, unsecured loans and credit card debt. And they won't even look at that guy, Caleb Hammer. He said there was a lady on there that took a $2,000 loan. The interest rate was 63%. Who in the hell does that? Maybe I need to get into the loan business. I don't know. But it's just insane that nobody can ask these questions or even think of these things, but they'll sign it. As long as I get my money, I'm good to go. Oh, I just got to pay it back. What's my minimum payment? That's all they're concerned about. It's absolutely insane. And then you wonder why these people that grow up and go into government, and you wonder why they make stupid decisions in government. What are the odds? What are the odds? Terry says, now my home is paid off. I'm going to put it in a trust so the trust owns it. That way, if something was to happen and somebody was to come after me, there's no real estate in my name. That's good thinking. That's very good thinking. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of who was the soccer player? A professional soccer player in Europe. It ends up he got married and stuff like that, and then his wife, obviously she was a gold digger, divorced him, wanted half, and he's like, everything's in my mom's name. So he owned nothing, and she didn't get a dime. It was hilarious. I thought that was awesome. That was a boss move. Zombie says 63%. Yeah, that's a big WTF. That is absolutely crazy. It's a consumer economy. Yep. That is absolutely true. But we used to teach how to be responsible and wise within a consumer economy. So at least you can make an informed decision. You want to pay that 63% interest rate? That's totally on you. It's a free market. Do what you want to do. Go ahead. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But don't complain about it later. When the bill comes due and 10 years down the road, all of a sudden your student loan debt has ballooned up and you never paid towards the interest or towards the principal, and then you complain about it. It's like, well, if you're the one who signed the documents, you did the loan packaging deal into the one loan, and you didn't read the anything on that. Yeah, that's your fault. Consumer economy, but we need to teach common sense now. Fairtha says, Terry, check your state laws. I looked into that as well, but doing it would cost me a ton of tax write-offs every year, so it wasn't worth it. Oh, yeah, definitely look into the tax considerations. Corsair the Pirate, evening or morning? It's morning here in Korea, so it might be evening where you're at, depending on where you're at. If you're in the U.S., it's probably evening. Or somewhere on the other side of the globe-ish. Good to have you aboard. We're just kind of BSing now. We're talking about budgeting and loans and education and the whole nine. Terry pops in and says, it's not bad in Texas. And in California, we have family members that do the trust thing as well. And that can be really, really good. It's definitely beneficial, especially with my grandmother's estate and all that stuff, the living trust and all that. I definitely need to have that because otherwise it would have gotten taxed to death because they just keep raising taxes there again and again and again, kind of like New York. But yeah, it is definitely something. And when if you don't take care of the P's and Q's, somebody else will take care of them for you. And it probably won't be for your benefit. Yeah, it's just crazy, crazy stuff. Yeah. Boda boom, big AI. Did I miss the DUI changes? No. Well, yeah, you did. But the basic takeaway was here in Korea, they want to do harsher sentencing because they had some foreigners get killed over here in Korea by Korean drunk drivers. And they have a minimum and a maximum sentence. max is lifetime, but generally the max that they usually give is 8 years, and they have a lot of repeat offenders for drunk driving. So they want to do more things to be more aggressive with punishment. And then they want to do like the blow into the tube of your car. And if you're drunk, your car won't turn on. So they're looking at doing that because of the recidivism rate on that was like 44%. So yeah, they're looking at ways to do that. But yeah, the DUI, they're clamping down on that. And I think the Justice Department is going to be a little bit harsher on their penalties. So yeah, I fully expect that to happen. And yeah, so that's what ended up happening. I mean, can you imagine crossing the street and getting run over by a drunk driver? And killed. That's rough. Shouldn't be a thing. But you have multiple people over here that get DUIs, and then you get people that get their license taken away, but then they'll just hop in a car anyway. That's happened as well. So, somebody will always do stupid and continue to do stupid regardless. And it's unfortunate because people like that, their moral compass is broke. But Terry says, you can open an LLC in Montana and add a home, but on the trust, you have to have a mortgage on your home. You'll have to get permission from the mortgage company to do it. Yeah, I've heard that as well. So that's the type of stuff that needs to be taught in school. I think you need to do social studies. I think you need to do history, math, science, reading comprehension, the Barney basics, world history, United States history. You need to go and learn how to do a budget. You need to do, how to figure out loans and all of that stuff. What are some of the, and especially with stuff like this, end of life stuff, trusts and wills and business plans and, corporations and all of this stuff, things that, to really make the next generation flourish, you need to give them the tools to say, hey, you can start a business. Here's the steps, and we learned how to do it in school. So when they get out, they have more options instead of just having to work dead-end jobs, that they can actually, take the risk, and there is risk in starting business, but, they can find and know how to manage their money, how to manage the finances of a small business. Some of the things like end of life, and retirement. Kids nowadays have no clue on what a Roth IRA is. They think that the Social Security is going to allow them to retire in a lap of luxury. And it's like, you do realize you need to work X amount of quarters to get and fund that, correct? Kids don't know that these days. It is insane. They think you're just going to get Social Security just because you're alive. No, you need to work and you need to pay your Social Security taxes, and maybe you'll get it. Maybe. Kids these days don't care about retirement. The majority of them. There's the outliers that do. Yes, there's a lot of stupid people out there. Yes. And I still do stupid from time to time. I ask my wife, she will tell you. But I fight against it because the mortgage company holds the title on the home. Oh, talking about the LLC and putting it into trust. Yeah. With the trust, you can avoid going through probate. Yeah. I mean, that should be taught in schools as well. I mean, how many people, I'm sure you all know somebody who's gotten screwed, family member, friend, or their parents or whatever that got screwed because everything went through probate and the state took a massive chunk out of the estate because of probate. That shouldn't ever be a thing. That is just, and like the inheritance or death tax, oh, don't get me started on that. That's robbery. That's theft. That's legalized theft right there, is probate. That is just insane. That's corrupt politician shit right there. That's all I'm going to say. Don't get me started. Oh, yeah. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Should all just win the lottery. Everything would be done, right? I keep getting spam messages for collaborations. This is the latest one. Hi, official thevariedlife@gmail.com. I'm Oliver from Feastables, the Mr. Beast Feastables. We create simple and clean chocolate snacks. I watched a few of your videos and it caught me attention. Would you be up for a quick chat about a casual idea to tried? Thanks, Oliver Smith. You know, the sad thing is, other people will get this and answer it in hopes that it's a deal from Feastables. Terry says they can hold you in probate for years while your lawyer fees add up. Yes, they will bleed you dry. Probate is horrible. Horrible, horrible. Horrible, horrible. And it didn't used to be that way until corrupt politicians came into and started getting lobbyists and all this stuff. And, you know, oh, we're going to raise taxes, and oh, we're going to do this, and oh, we're going to probate. You know, probate. What are you talking about? Probate? You know, or 501c3s when that whole thing came about. Holy crow. Churches didn't used to be 501c3s because there was a time before there was a 501c3, but it was actually a tool in which the government used to corrupt politicians so that people in religious organizations would not speak out against certain political figures because it's disallowed under the 501c3 thing. You're lawfully signing away your freedom of speech when you sign up for a 501c3 as a church, because it's rare, but there's a stipulation in there that the government can silence you for and take away your tax status as a nonprofit. But that was all tax-free even before the 501c3. So it was tax-free anyway for a church. But you need a 501c3 nowadays. Yeah. Anyway, let's see. They can hold your property in fees, not feed. They feed off of your probate. That I would say that's a Freudian slip there. So yeah, it's a fee, but they feed off of it, off the blood, sweat, and tears of people that they have no relation with whatsoever, and they get money from that. It's just wrong as the day is long. It's just wrong. I don't care if you make a lot. I don't care if you make a little. The principle of the thing is that the government should not take away what you give to your youngins, your beneficiaries. It's just not, oh, we're going to get 20%, 10%, this and that. Oh, if you don't do, if you don't have a trust or this or that, it's going to go to probate and they'll take, 30, 40, 50% of the estate. Why? Why? Oh, because we want money. But that's the thing that they don't say out loud. So, yeah. Terry says, check with your bank about signing a transfer on death form because they can lock your bank account and your family can't get the money. That is absolutely true. Yep. They will lock you down and you can have nothing. And again, how does this happen? It's all under the guise of we're doing it's for your safety and your security. And it's like, as you have me bent over throwing sand and you're pumping, hard and fast, suddenly I'm not feeling very safe and secure. Yeah, it's probate. Oh, probate is good for me? Oh, yes, I can feel it is. It doesn't feel good for me. Can you stop that? That's what it feels like. Yeah. Absolutely insane. I don't know. That's why I'm an independent. That's why I'm an independent. I've run the gamut for political sides, and now I'm an independent. So it is what it is. Anyway, so that's what we got going on. Man, we've been on here for almost 2.5 hours. Wow, time flies when you're having fun and pissed off at the government. So anyway, let's go ahead and we'll round this out. The one thing that I ask every single one of you that is watching, if you please like the video, please. I'm begging. I know begging doesn't do anything. It's rough, but I would appreciate it. It would help out the channel. And if you, subscribe, that would be an even better thing. And yeah, it would be a thing. That would be the thing that I would want out of this whole thing. But I already got the cool stuff. I mean, the thing that I got out of it is great discussions and conversations that we have online, sharing of information and just being, I mean, who thought you would be able to have conversations with somebody that's on the other side of the world, in basically real time? That is insane. We're living in such a crazy time. And there's some great advancements, great benefits. But then with that, there's some problems that arise as well. I don't think that'll ever end. But we need to, we need to do what's right. We need to be decent human beings to each other and do what makes sense. And yeah, that's it. Zombie says, "Okay, Steve, the stream's getting weird." Right? That's the. Yep. We won't cross that line because it could get really, really weird. But anyway, yeah, I appreciate it. I like these streams. I like the conversations that we have and stuff like this, and hearing the different stories, because there's a lot of people that, might not know these things. Oh, we didn't talk about China marches on the Han River. Oh, we didn't even talk about delivery woes. Holy crow, we missed a whole bunch because we got sidetracked. Should I go over it? Yeah, I think we can go over it. I got time. I'm retired. Let's go check this out. Let me close this and close that. And where is it? Unemployed. China marches on the Han River here in Korea. Yeah, this kind of pissed some people off. This riled some feathers because of the ongoing rift between Koreans and Chinese, and another 2.5 hours. No. We just got a couple more things, and we'll do that. But it's no surprise, and for those of you who don't know, China and Korea have not been on good terms recently. There have been some problems. Chinese come over here and they buy property in Korea, and then Korean government got mad and says, "Hey, wait a second. Your citizens can come to our country and buy property, but we can't go to your country and buy property." So there was some uproar about that. And then there were some problems with some Chinese citizens that visited Korea, and then Korea opened up its doors for a visa-free vacations for Chinese, and then some Chinese ended up doing bad things, trashing bathrooms and restaurants, defecating on national landmarks, areas and stuff like that. And so it's just not going well for Chinese tourism. Now realize that most Chinese are probably not like that, but there's more and more incidents of that in social media, so it's causing a problem. This didn't do anything to help the situation. So we're going to look at this on how the Chinese marched on the Han River. Here it is. Chinese tourists sparked backlash in Seoul over military-style march at Han River Park. There they are. It looks like they have rank. They have rank on their uniform. Some of them have there's a little rank there, and there's one there. That looks like a military uniform to me. That's all I'm saying. The hat, the camo, the whole 9 yards. It's just kind of like, what's going on? Well, it ends up that a video showing a group of Chinese tourists marching in military-style uniform along Han River Park, Seoul's Han River Park, prompted strong backlash in Korea, with critics accusing the participants of crossing a line. The footage first uploaded to Chinese social media on Tuesday and later showed widely online in Korea shows dozens of men and women in matching uniforms and caps marching in formation with their arms swinging in sync. At the front, a participant carries a red flag, giving the scene of a look of a military parade. I would be interested to know what the Chinese flags say, but they blurred that all out. And it was during an international walking exchange event at Uido Honggang Park in Seoul on October 31st. The event was part of the International Walking Exchange by the Korea-China Cultural Exchange Organization and the China Health Walking Sports Association. Had about 100 participants, with many of them being Chinese. The organizers told social media that the controversial outfits were not military uniforms, but club attire. A representative from the Korea-China Cultural Exchange Organization is simply a walking event for the Chinese visitors who enjoy fitness activities. The clothing was a coordinated outfit for the group, not military wear. I'm wondering if the choice of uniform for the walking sports that they do, somebody should have said, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe we should just have matching khaki shorts and tops. However, people online in Korea were not convinced. Many pointed out the participants' attire, including the matching olive green uniform, jacket, pants, caps, resembled uniforms. It's not even the official uniform of the People's Liberation Army. Wearing such clothing abroad feels inappropriate. Another added, China invaded Korea during the Korean War. Wearing military-style clothing on our soil is crossing the line. Others compared the situation how China might react if Koreans stage a similar event in Beijing. If a group of Koreans marched through Tiananmen Square in uniform carrying a Korean flag, Chinese authorities would never allow it. This is not the first time the actions of Chinese tourists have sparked controversy. In July, a Chinese visitor planted a national flag on a beach in Udo, Jeju-do Island, sparking anger online. September, a group dressed as Kipayo, traditional Chinese dress, performed a public dance near Jeju's Songsong Ilchubong, drawing criticism about cultural insensitivity. Last month, the organizers of the Yeoju Okgok Naru Festival in Gyeonggi-do Province apologized after a Chinese performance group used footage of a military parade as a stage backdrop. I would probably just go with a khaki pants and maybe Nike shirt or Adidas, little hat, not something so militaristic. I don't know why they think that would be a good idea. When you travel to another country, you probably don't want to be offensive. I don't know. George says, aren't we approaching the anniversary of the Frozen Chosen? This seems rather insulting. Yeah, there's that, because China was for those people who don't know the history of Korea and the Korean War, the Chinese came down along with North Korea, and yeah, it was very, very bad. And so there's a lot of bad blood between, China and Korea, and of course Japan that had occupational rule here in Korea for such a long time, and did atrocities that some say even far surpassed what happened during the Holocaust in World War II by Germany. Read up on what the Japanese did against the Korean people. It just, holy crow. It's incredible how depraved man can get against other men and other human beings. So, there's that. Yeah, I could see where that would probably, I don't know why anybody would stop and think, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea culturally. Maybe we should just kind of do, the Nike Adidas sweatsuit and, something a little bit more up to date and less confrontational. Thing that gets me is there's obviously some rank on some of these uniforms. So right there. And then another video I saw, yeah, it looks like they had a ranking system on their uniforms. Some of them had it, some of them didn't. But again, culturally, I don't think that was probably the best call for a walking event to kind of bring people of Korea and China together, to kind of put a good light, and kind of put aside all the stupid stuff that has been happening recently with Chinese tourists that have done stupid. Granted, they're a minority. They would probably think, hey, let's put our best foot forward. Let's show up in military uniforms, like uniforms. Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. So, yeah, people are mad. It is what it is. Organizers should learn a lesson from this. So there's that. And the last one we'll talk about is the last one. Well, next to the last one. Yeah. Here in Korea, you can pretty much get anything delivered at your door. It is pretty efficient, pretty fast, except for Amazon. Amazon will take about a week, maybe a week and a half. But aside from that, if anything's in Korea, you can get it pretty much delivered the next day, sometimes within hours. And that's where this next article comes into play. So Korea can't live without dawn delivery. That's a thing here in Korea. Can it still protect the workers behind it? And basically what it ends up doing is every night I place my order after I put my kids to bed. By the time we wake up, the groceries are at the door. Yeah, that's a thing. So they will you can put in your order the night prior, and by morning you can have your groceries sitting in front of your door. They will be delivered. That means that somebody has got to fill the orders, put them on a truck, and then a delivery driver has to drive through the night or early hours of the morning to get those groceries or the things that you order to your door. For tens of millions of South Koreans, ultra-fast overnight delivery is not just a convenience, it's a lifeline. Whether it's rice, diapers, last-minute school supplies, services like Coupang, Rocket Wow Delivery, which we have that, has made it normal to receive orders placed at midnight by 7 a.m. the next day. But it comes with hidden costs. Labor advocates raise concern about the costs and the backlash and how hard it is for workers. Companies are considering limiting deliveries between midnight and 5 a.m., citing health risks for workers. And they're going to talk about that. News headlines claimed a union was demanding a ban on dawn delivery. They warned of the looming consumer chaos and accused the union of ignoring the needs of millions. The truth is, by the time the restriction was one of several, at the time, the restriction was one of the discussion points, and it was not a final proposal. Was buried according to the head of Coupang division. The union never called for a ban, but headlines said otherwise. So, yeah, they've got some news issues here too, just like every other country. So anyway, it ends up that, this does brings about some things. They talk about the long work hours that people work in Korea. And of course, if you work night shift, your body gets out of the circadian rhythm and you're more prone, you don't recover as fast. They're more prone to depression and overwork and so on and so forth, which is actually a thing. So, so the delivery people, those people are, a lot. You would think a lot of them would say, yeah, let's stop this. But the majority of them are like, no, we get better pay, better flexibility. I can do stuff during the day. They're able to work more hours or whatever it is. But with that being said, it also causes problem because emotionally, these people have more depression, as far as the stats in a whole and so on and so forth. Sleep disorders, depression are 3 to 4 times higher than regular Korean workers. Higher levels of unaliving themselves, which you know what that means. So it's something that comes into play in that most delivery workers choose the right to work night shifts because they get more money. And they're subcontracted as delivery agents. They're not employees of the company, but they found that they like it because night delivery avoids traffic, it pays better, and allows for more flexibility. So Yeah, there's pros and cons with everything, but yeah, it's definitely a thing here in Korea of getting stuff delivered. Again, I can get pretty much anything delivered to my apartment. Groceries, and we're talking vegetables, staples, the whole 9 yards. Hell, we had our car delivered to our apartment when we bought our car. It was dropped off down in the underground parking. Guy gave us the keys. We test drove it for 3 days, took it to a mechanic and said, yeah, this is a great looking car, good deal. And yeah, that's how we shopped for our car. If we didn't want the car, we would call and say, hey, here's the deal. Yeah, we don't want it. We're going to look for another one. Guy would come back, pick up the car. So you can get anything delivered in Korea, anything and everything. It's amazing. But with that comes, those are jobs. Those, and sometimes they're hard jobs, sometimes they're long jobs, but they're definitely constant jobs, and they, it's a thing here in Korea. But yeah, having worked night shifts and graveyard shifts and all that stuff, that is taxing. If it's like for me, excuse me, for me, working graveyard shift wasn't a bad thing for me. I actually liked it. I got more pay, the whole 9 yards. But it was taxing on my family life. And so those were some of the cons of working graveyard shift. So, but the same thing, yeah, it is. It's things go back and forth, the pros and cons. I mean, here's the question I have. Would you like to order something at like 9, 10, or before midnight and have it delivered at your door by 7 a.m.? Would that be something that you would do in your country? That'd be kind of it answers a lot of questions, and it's like it can save a lot of time. So instead of me having to drive, go to the grocery store, go through the aisles, go through my list and whatever, in the comfort of my own home, I can get on an app and I can be like, okay, I want lettuce, I want kimchi, I want this, I want that, and this, and this, and this, and this, and then boom, click order, and then it's delivered to my front door. I probably saved myself an hour, and instead of having to go to the grocery store like multiple times during the week because I don't want to carry heavy bags, up the elevator and stairs and whatever and get to my apartment. Now I can do larger orders. I mean, that's how we do it sometimes. Or if there's something pops up and it's like, oh, we're going to have company over. Hey, let's order a cake, or whatever it is, or a special food. We can have it delivered, by 7 a.m. in the morning for the next day. That's coming in handy a few times as well. So, yeah, it is something. We've used it and we enjoy it. So there's that. The last thing I want to take a look at is for those people who have. Let me see if I can find it again. Dun, dun, dun. There it is. Some people have noticed that my Facebook has gone away. Yes, my Facebook went away. My Facebook went away initially because of. I did a live stream and I posted the YouTube live stream I actually streamed on Facebook as well. And I was reading crime stats from articles from Korean news sources like we do here. And it triggered the algorithm for Facebook, and then I was done. It was no appeal. Of course, it's all automated, so I couldn't appeal and say I was referencing news articles, public articles that are accessible on the internet. Yeah, you can't talk to a human being to save your life. So I had another page, and then it ends up that went away, and then had to do the face recognition thing, and then the page went away, and so now I've got another page. Okay, so here it is, and there it is. So if you want to join me on Facebook, mostly with that'll be in the comments section. I just recently started. You still got Facebook Messenger? I can get messages on Facebook. So I've had to redo my friends and stuff like that. But with that link, if you hit that and you could send me a friend thing, invitation, whatever it is, you can do that. And then we could talk using the Messenger. This is like co-shared with my wife, so I try to just keep it with just like hobby stuff or whatever. But if you want to say hi, that's absolutely fine. But if you have other stuff, you can contact me on my email. So we'll see how long this Facebook page lasts, because they did that whole facial recognition thing. More companies are doing that. You need to verify your account. And now you have to do, you got to do the face thing. And then that's how you verify the account now. Is that scary? Who has access to that information? Where is that being stored at? Can that get hacked? Probably. Can that be used against me? Probably. I don't know. It's just going to be an interesting little thing that we got there. But yeah, Facebook Messenger, yeah. I should be able to get messages on that. Matter of fact, I got a guy named Tim, and then another buddy I know, he sent me a message. So yeah, I'm trying to catch up on that. And then of course, all the groups I belong to, I had to reapply for all the groups that I'm on, like, Korea and, expat and 3D printing and, cosplay and whatever, resin printing, miniature painting, all that stuff, sports, working out. I had to do all that again. So yeah. So if you miss me on there it is. All that feeds the AA models so they can track us all on public cameras. I know, right? Know your every move. Big Brother. What was the, and eventually it'll get to the Minority Report. Remember that Tom Cruise movie, The Minority Report, where the precogs, and they could tell before you committed a crime, and that's how they would get people? That's scary. And that was flawed as well. So, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's just going to take a while. So anyway, that's what we got going on. We didn't want to take this too long, but with the, I guess I could show you the webpage or the Facebook page. So there it is. That's what it looks like. The Varied Life at The Varied Life 66. I've got one friend. Woes me. I only have one friend, but that's because of the Facebook thing. Yeah, so not a lot there. Not a lot there. It is what it is. But that's just going to be sharing mostly 3D printing stuff and kind of rehashing some of the modeling and the cosplay stuff. I'll put videos on there. So there's that. But you can contact me through that. Another way that you can contact me is through email, which is this right here. Official thevariedlife@gmail.com. I always answer my emails. So if you just want to show me, I don't know, pictures of your models, your dogs. Somebody sent me a picture of their barbecued ribs that they did the other day. Man, they look good. Or just to say hi, or you have questions about how we retired here in Korea and our situation with me and the wife, feel free to email. I'll answer every single email, even if it's just to say hi. So there's that there. There's a bunch of people over here that bought me coffee. You can do that. That's in the link in the description box down below. But if you don't, that's absolutely cool. The best thing that you could all do is like and subscribe to the channel. The like would really, really help out. And I want to try to grow the YouTube channel more. Granted, I'm old and not as hip as the youngsters that are out there. And my channel is kind of in a niche thing with retired in Korea and 3D printing. Old guy doing cosplay, 3D printing and painting miniatures. That probably not going to get a lot of attention on that. So every little like and subscribe helps. But I really enjoy the conversations. All that aside and everything else, I enjoy the conversations and doing this and talking with people around the world. People in Australia, people in the United States, Europe, other Asian countries and stuff like that. I have chatted with a guy from South America and Brazil. That was kind of cool, just out of the blue. Just cool stuff. And then you all help me be smarter as well, because like I said, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm not a spoon. I'm kind of around a spork. So I need all the help I can get. So that's it. With that said, we will cut this short. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Zombie, Ferrithus, George, everybody else that is on there. I think we ended up Terry. Of course, Terry's on there. We didn't have Alan. We had Zombie Hunter. CB was here. We didn't get Adam. We had a couple of Adams. None of those guys showed up today. And then there's a couple other people that are usually here in Korea, but they must be off and sleeping in. Pat Starr was here, so yeah, we got a number of people that showed up, and then the people that didn't even comment. You're just kind of watching, hiding in the wings. There's those. So thank you for watching. Alrighty. Boom. Yeah, I have so many YouTube families. Yep, it is. And I enjoy the conversations, and I appreciate all of you. So with that, we'll just leave it at a do, and you all have a good one wherever you're at in the world, and hopefully we'll see you on the next video. All right? All right. Peace. Good stuff. Good seeing you. Take care. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good seeing you. Yep. Netventive. Hey, Netventive got in on the deals. Yeah, you have good ones too. Good seeing you here. And I think that's it. 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, we got another one. See you, Steve, and everyone in the chat. 2, 1, and we are done.